Chapter 6. Before the Thaw. Clouds hung low over the fort, and the trees beyond our walls bent with the weight of snow. Erratic flakes swirled in eddies where the walls cut out the worst of the winter winds, or piled in drifts against the imposing towers at each corner of the fort. The Roman encampment had defended this stretch of the Rhine long enough that the buildings were made of stone, a welcome luxury for those who must wait out the winter in barracks, but dangerous when icy. Marcus chose his footing carefully as we climbed one of the towers. A chill gust caught us as we stepped into the commander's office. "Do you take that hound everywhere you go, Atratinus?" The general didn't pretend to hide his irritation. This was his pack and he could bark as he liked. My master looked back at me guiltily, and I bunched up in a bid to seem smaller. "Sorry, sir," Marcus said. The general regarded us for a moment from behind his desk, a man past his best years, greying at the temple, but there was still something of the wolf in his eyes. I ducked my head and braced myself to have to stay out in the cold wind. But the elfer relented. "Oh, no matter, bring him in or leave him outside. Just be quick. It's cold enough in this old fort without you letting the heat out." Marcus flicked his finger, giving me permission to enter. I darted in and placed myself as close to the brazier as I dared. The general's look warned me not to push my luck. I lowered my head again to show I understood his dominance and tried to stay out of the way. "I'm sure you can guess why I called you here, Marcus." Marcus nodded stiffly. "I'm sorry, sir, I have spoken to my men. It won't happen again." The general tapped a hand against his impeccably shaven chin and regarded Marcus. "That's reassuring as far as it goes, but I believe that this isn't the first outbreak of tension between your units." "No, sir." The general waited a second, but Marcus stood to attention and said no more. "Some incident concerning one of Drustanus' men, wasn't it? I recall finding for you." "You did, thank you, sir." General Silius snorted. "I'm glad I didn't invite you here for your conversation." "Sir." "All right, if that's how you want it. It comes to this. I can't have squads of legionary cavalry at each other's throat all the time." Marcus made no response, but I sensed him tensing. "I'm not laying blame at your door, only saying it can't go on." "Sir, I'll do all that is necessary to ensure—" No, it's past that. I heard blades were drawn at this last incident." "My man Cx was outnumbered, sir. He was simply defending himself against an unwarranted attack." "Won't try and explain things away on your own account, but will speak up for your man, eh? Good." "Sir?" The general took a sip from the goblet on the table next to him. I smelled herbs and wine. "I can't have it, Atratinus. Bad enough being cooped up through the winter with men just itching to get back to battle, without having two officers and their men tearing each other apart. With all respect, sir, shouldn't Drustanus be here as well?" The general raised an eyebrow. "You mean to tell me how to discipline my own men now?" "No, sir, my apologies." The general broke off a small piece of meat from the roast bird next to him, and surreptitiously waved it at me under the table. I yearned to accept the morsel, but I stayed where I was. Drool began to slide from my mouth. The general spoke again. "He's well trained, your dog. I've no doubt your men are equally disciplined." "If they were, you wouldn't have to be asking about the fighting," Marcus said. "You go too far. I'm not one to blame a man for defending himself. Your man Cx was outnumbered and he did all he could to avoid a cowardly attack." The general tossed the bit of fowl in front of me. I couldn't help whining, but I didn't move. "Oh, let him have it, Atratinus," the general said. He pointed to the scrap of food, then me. "You've just illustrated my problem. You don't know when to relent." Marcus looked from the food to me. "I don't—" The general looked slightly exasperated. "Precisely, you don't. Discipline has its place, but there's more to making a man follow you than that. Drustanus isn't standing here with you because he understands this. Although he doesn't match all your skills, he does know how to command men. How to get them on his side." "Sir?" Marcus's jaw bulged, but he stayed still and waited for Silius to continue. "Commanding men is about more than setting an example, Marcus. You're too harsh and you expect too much. Take your dog, for instance. He respects your injunction against taking the meat, but wouldn't he be happier if you let him indulge his needs from time to time? He is an animal, sir, at his best when given direction." Marcus was stubborn as he dared to be to his superior. "But that's just it, Atratinus. Drustanus is enough of the animal to make his men comfortable. Your men certainly respect you enough to fight for you, but you set yourself apart from them." "That is certainly not my intention, sir," Marcus said. "Yet it is what I have read by watching you. And I have been watching you, Decurio." The general gave Marcus an appraising look. "Difficult to read," I heard him mutter softly. Marcus straightened still further under the general's gaze until he was taut as a lyre string. "I will endeavour to do all that is required to improve my leadership, sir." The general's face curled into another smile. "Please forgive me, Marcus. I was not offering criticism, at least not criticism meant as harshly as you will no doubt take it. Marcus looked still more perturbed. I must confess I am at a loss, sir. If my performance is lacking, then the General's weary smile remained fixed. You are adequate to your position, Marcus. I know all your men would fight to the death for you, and I know their discipline to be exemplary. You are not one of the types that would abuse them to the point of mutiny, a possibility we faced only months ago. In other circumstances I would happily leave you where you are, but it is my feeling that we are not using your talents to the best advantage. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. The General leant back in his chair. How may I put this so it is clear to you? You are not suited to a large command. Your abilities lend themselves to another kind of work, which requires just as much in the way of decisiveness. The General trailed off for a moment, clearly picking his words. What I am saying is that it is not in your nature to be dependent on others. Your men may need you, but you have no need of them, if that makes sense to you. Sir, to be honest, it doesn't, Marcus replied promptly. Blunt, but no less than I'd have expected from you, Atratinus. Let's just say that I have two problems at the moment. I don't want my men cutting themselves up all winter because of a feud between two of their commanders, and last week the Senate sent us some oversight in the form of one Lucius Apronus. Marcus nodded his acknowledgment, and the General continued. Tiberius might be publicly praising Caesar for his attack on the Marsi, but the truth is the Emperor resents his success. Time is running out if we're going to strike another blow, and Germanicus' thinking is it would be better if we didn't wait for summer to begin the campaign. How do you imagine I plan to deal with these mounting problems, Decurio? I am no great strategist, sir, but I imagine I wouldn't be standing here with you telling me this unless it had something to do with me, Marcus allowed. A bit presumptuous, but close enough to the mark. The fact is, I can get the reconnaissance I need for an early strike and eliminate the infighting in my camp simply by reassigning you. The General looked pleased with his cleverness, and a second treat landed next to the first, but I resisted that too. You're taking away my command, sir. Marcus's voice was tight. I said reassigning, not demoting. I want to put your talents to work across the Rhine, the General hastened to add. With all respect, sir, I'm no spy. The General took Marcus's assertion in his stride. So Segmund said. He also said you were the most able scout we have. Sir, don't take it like that, man. You do all too much glowering for a Stoic, Atratinus. I said I wasn't demoting you, and I meant it. If you prove yourself, you'll become one of a very select group of men who are my eyes and ears in this campaign. Serve well enough and Caesar himself may hear your name, more than you could hope for in your chosen role as a minor officer with no family worth speaking of. Silius lifted his goblet to his lips as if making a toast to an opponent over a gaming board. Marcus tensed as he did whenever the subject of his family came up. I am yours to command, General, but I must ask that you think of my men, particularly Ceyx. A new officer might not protect him, and he has made many enemies on my behalf. A concern, sure enough. The General frowned. If you think he won't hinder you, then take him with you. That way I won't have entirely robbed you of your command. The General nodded to himself and put his lips back to the goblet. He took a long draught before placing the cup down again and beginning to rummage around in the reports on his desk. After a minute or so he looked up. Oh, my apologies, you're free to go. Segmund will give you more detailed instructions. The two... He paused. 3 of you should be over the Rhine before the end of the week. The Elfer looked down at me. While we consider the topic of forgetful commanders, you should either tell your dog he can have that meat, or go out and get me a new skin for my floor. The skin in question was damp with my saliva. I hadn't moved, but my body was reacting on its own. The General gave me a quizzical look. That's a well-trained dog. I don't suppose you would part with him. It seems Segmund has given you more than one idea, sir. He makes me that same offer every time he sees Ferox. And you refuse us both without even asking for an offer? The General smirked. Don't tell me we've found a chink in the Stoic's armor. Marcus shrugged. It's not a matter of money, sir. I haven't spent so much time on him to see him get fat and lazy in winter quarters after having trained him. Meaning that those of us who are staying behind are fat and lazy? The General tried to sound stern, but couldn't quite hide his humor. Meaning that some dogs were meant for hunting, sir. The General snorted. Very good, Decurio. Marcus turned to leave, and I took that as my cue to snatch up the treats that Silius had thrown me. I was halfway to the door before another piece of meat hit the floor in front of me. I looked back and saw the Elfer smiling at me. I wagged my tail to show my gratitude and scooped up the gift before slipping from the room. Close the door, quickly now, Silius called after us. The door shut, and Marcus and I were alone looking out over the snowbound camp. Our breath rose in the winter air, and Marcus pulled his fur-lined cloak about him. Cold enough to freeze Vulcan's balls, he complained to me as we headed for the stairs. When we reached the bottom, there was a figure waiting for us. I might have known you'd be waiting, you spider, Marcus said to Segmund. Not good enough that you've taken my command, you had to gloat too? The larger man chuckled. I knew you wouldn't like it. I can't say I like the idea of going over the river before summer either, but we need to establish whether the chief's plan to catch the Germans napping is viable. You don't need me for that, Marcus protested. On the contrary, I'm going to need someone with precisely your skills. It's not just about seeing if they're ready for us. The logistics of a full campaign are huge. Segmon waved his arms expansively like a fisherman describing a fictitious catch. Marcus snorted and his breath streamed from him. He glared at his friend. I'm not the only scout you could have called on. You're not the only one I have called on, but you are one of the ones I trust most. Caesar is waiting for a break in the weather, but he'll want to move just as soon as he can. It's up to us to divine the best path and see him through that infernal forest. We're working with the higher-ups, Marcus, laying out the very foundations of the campaign. Think of the opportunities that will represent. Segmon smiled. His cheeks were red with the cold, and I could just smell a touch of spirit on his breath. My master had little love for the big man's brand of optimism, but he couldn't help but return that contagious grin. Opportunities, Marcus echoed. Like getting shot or stabbed before anyone else or tortured as a spy. Perhaps some frostbite. I've never known you give in to fear. Segmon affected a scandalized look. Nor do I now, but I'm not dazzled by the chance to serve these men of quality either. Marcus regarded his friend. You know I've never refused service, Segmon. Why didn't you just ask me first? Segmon made a dismissive gesture. The general wanted to meet you. I told him you were the man I wanted, and he said to send you to him. Segmon clapped my master on the back. Besides, you're forgetting how this works, soldier. They don't ask you, they tell you. Marcus blew out his cheeks. Except in this case, it's you doing the telling. And you don't want to take orders from an old slob like me? Segmon asked. You know that's not it, Marcus replied, and stared his friend in the eye. Segmon sighed. All right, if it makes you happy. He cleared his throat. Marcus, my old friend, will you please stop spending this winter fighting with your fellow officers and help me prepare the invasion we're all here to carry out? With pleasure, Marcus winked. His face turned up in a mischievous grin. Now who's going to tell CX he's not going to spend his winter curled up in a warm tent? Your man is coming too? Segmon rubbed his chin as he considered the unexpected development. For my own part, I began to wish they would have the rest of their conversation in a warm tent. My feet had begun to go numb, and I thought ruefully of the brazier in the general's office. I asked the general, and he agreed, Marcus was saying. Then by all means, as his officer, you should tell him. Segmon considered things for a few moments longer before adding, It will be good for you to have someone other than Ferox to order around. I looked up at the sound of my name. Had they finally seen sense and decided to get indoors? My master met my eye. Out there we'd do well to listen to Ferox, he murmured before we headed off to the respite of our quarters. The woods were wild and welcoming. It took a few days for my master to get over his disappointment at how things had transpired. Though the general had been careful not to frame it as demotion, Marcus was not a man who enjoyed failure. His mood during the first few days of our journey into enemy territory made it clear how he viewed his new posting. The loss of his command had taken its toll, and despite his refusal to admit to emotions, I could tell that he missed his men. CX's presence helped soften the blow of having lost our pack. The wiry rider was canny enough to read my master's mood, and to lift it when he could. Marcus would never have admitted that his general's decision had been right, but the situation suited us far better than being cooped up in camp. Even the cold didn't feel so bad as long as we kept moving. CX also wasn't nearly so noisy when he stopped speaking. The small man moved well and kept up easily enough. We became a silent pack, shadowing Segmon as he travelled through the tribe's territories, scouting out paths and lending silent support at need. The tribespeople were welcoming enough to the merchant who brought exotic goods and was happy to chat about the most banal gossip. Marcus and CX let their hair grow at Segmon's insistence. That way they would stand out less if seen, but he would never trust them to go into a village or settlement. Our job was to do the long-range scouting, to judge the enemy's strengths and assess the best ways that he might be assailed. Once or twice it became necessary to keep Segmon safe from the elements that prowled the narrow forest paths. Bandits were no friend to travelling merchants, apparently alone in the wilderness. For my part, the weeks together in those woods were an unlooked-for joy. At night the others complained about the cold or compared strategies, but I listened to the night, the hooting owls, the creak of birch and ash, all tantalizingly close just beyond the reach of the firelight. It was another world, vital and raw, a universe that would accept me as it could never accept those I travelled with. They would not run naked under the moon, nor sink their teeth in uncooked flesh, still steaming with life's last shivers. The changes they brought with them would cling to their well-trodden paths and haunt the crossroads they left behind, but they would never touch the vastness that lay beyond their narrow ways. When the moon was fat and shimmering on the snow, when the shadows from the trees were sharp as blades, then it seemed it would be easy to slip away and become lost in the emptiness. It was what Rome's soldiers feared most, that wildness, the shadows the tribesmen still recognized and worshipped, shapes in the mist, murmurs on the wind. The little gods that fell back before the tread of sandaled feet, but were forever waiting just beyond the veil of their perception, as unreachable as the slyly winking stars. Perhaps I should have obeyed my instinct and run to that darkness, but I had my friends and we were pack. The windswept night was a muttered promise I could only dream of, a thing as distant as the swollen moon that peeked through the tight branches when we travelled by night, or flashed from the fires of the camps and villages we surveyed. It drew you in, but intuition told me it could never be touched. As Segmund figured it, the first Roman attack had left the tribes tense, but everyone thought the weather would give them more time. Spring meant melts, and with rivers in flood, proper campaigning would be impossible. It seemed unthinkable to the tribes on the eastern side of the Rhine that we would attack again before summer, but that, Segmund said, was likely to happen. Such speculation was beyond me. I left them to their nighttime discussions, and they left me to stare out at the enticing sprawl beyond the fire. I was sad when we began making our way back to our side of the river. The men might have found the nights threatening, but I was more apprehensive about what went on behind wooden walls. When Segmund did decide that it was time to turn back, the pace was very different. Now that he felt he had gathered enough intelligence, he was in a hurry to return to the commanders while the information he had was still valuable. We had established that the loose alliance between the tribes was fraying, and if the legions struck quickly, it might make all the difference. The sedate wanderings of a trader no longer served us. Now we made a dash back for the Rhine. Segmund told my master that he had wind of a particularly juicy piece of gossip. If it was to be believed, Arminius and his father-in-law were all but at each other's throats. This friction between the leaders of the tribes was something to capitalize on, providing we struck quickly. Segmund's reasoning made little difference to me. All I knew was that the men wanted to move more quickly, and I was happy to match their pace. I took great joy bounding through the snowbound land. With youth, such exuberance comes naturally, though as I was to discover, the trouble with being in a hurry is you get careless. They were upwind or I would have smelled them, men wrapped in hides, hidden in the trees. The first we knew of them was the arrow that sprouted in Ceyx's shoulder. Marcus threw himself down into the snow and called me to him. A second arrow thudded into a tree inches from him. He threw up a cloud of fresh snow as he wriggled deeper under the cover of a fallen tree. A few paces behind him, Segmund was trying to do the same, but with less success. "Marcus, can you see them?" he yelled out. My master gave no reply. Ceyx's gasp broke the air. He lay on his back, his breath ascending in plumes and blood staining the snow around him. "Ferox!" My master was barely speaking above a whisper. "Find them, Ferox!" I heard his heart pounding, but he did not allow his excitement to control him as he slowly drew his bow from his pack. Marcus's steadiness helped me to retain my focus. I understood. We were hunting now. "Marcus!" Segmund called again. Marcus put an arrow to his bowstring. He glanced my way and followed my gaze. I could hear our ambushes moving through the trees like any deer we might have hunted. It briefly occurred to me to wonder how we could hunt so many, but I took my lead from my master. Marcus reared up from his hiding place and sent an arrow streaking into the gloom. Luck was with him and a cry echoed through the dusk. "Stay down, Segmund! Get out of here if you can!" Marcus yelled back. 2 arrows flew from the dark. One of them almost parted Marcus's hair. He stood for a second longer to return fire, but there was no indication that the arrow found its mark. At a sign from Marcus, I bounded forward at the same time as he broke in the other direction. More arrows whistled after us, but we were both too quick for them to find. Ceyx was moving now, leaving a dark trail in the snow. I spotted the first of our attackers crouched low in the dense brush. The man raised his bow again as our eyes met. The string went taut. My chest swelled as I hauled myself forward in a cloud of powdered snow. The shaft loosed, but I was already airborne. My leap ended with his cry as my fangs buried themselves into his shoulder. He thrashed about in pain, and his fist hit my side before I could bite again. I twisted and snapped, this time finding the give of his throat. In his panic, the man made the mistake of trying to rear back. I hung in the air for a second, then something gave, and my victim collapsed towards me, his neck a gaping ruin. The blood was hot and salt in my mouth as I turned on the next man. He was running at me, spear leveled, but before he could reach me, an arrow fired at close range punched into him. Marcus followed the arrow with a cry. Even as the man with the spear breathed his last, he leapt forward, his short sword in hand. Steel rung out between the indifferent trees, and my blood sung to the note. A new opponent rushed at Marcus's side, but I was on him, throwing all my weight at his legs. He was big, and I yelped as his shins dug into my side. I was thrown back, and he stumbled. I snarled, recovering myself faster than he did, and sank my fangs deep into his weapon arm. His axe fell from his hand, and he bellowed in anguish. To my right, Marcus slipped his blade back out of the blond man's guts. My master had scooped up his first opponent's sword in his offhand, and he stood against a tide of attackers, brandishing his swords and weaving between the thrusting spear tips. Harsh voices sounded between the trees, and somewhere further off, Ceyx was putting up what resistance he could. Segmon was nowhere to be seen. My jaws were locked on the tribesman's forearm. I learned to be wary of men's offhands the hard way. The stone hit me just above the eye. It was as if the sky had fallen. Something snapped and the edge of my vision began to flicker. The stone fell again, but I held on, keeping the brute from my master's back. Blackness descended over half the world and blood ran down my muzzle. I couldn't help it. My jaw loosened and he wrenched free in a spray of gore. A heavy boot thudded into my side and I was thrown tumbling through the icy powder of the snow. The musty scent of old rot rose from the pine needles beneath the winter blanket. The spectre of death can become unfamiliar, even to one who knows it well. As the heavy-set warrior raised the rock in his hand high over his head, I felt the wind blow in hard from the world beyond. A world I had first scented in Appius's fighting pits, still as strange to me as the first time I sensed it. I would not meet that storm on my back. It seemed as if the ground was undulating beneath me, the shadows gathering to pounce, but I stood, fangs bared, daring him to come on. The tribesman gave a gap-toothed snarl of his own. The black wind rose, streaming from the endless night. I howled to be heard above it. An iron blade thrust out of the tribesman's chest. His eyes widened as he stared down at the sharp point in disbelief. Blood ran the length of the blade, mingling with my own in the muddy snow. He slumped forward and fell to one side. Beyond him, Marcus fought on, silent through it all. Though I knew he must hear the wind howling for us, must see the gloom closing in. The loss of the stolen sword had cost him dearly, and as I watched, a stave came down on the side of his head, dropping him instantly. I tried to reach him, but my head lurched, and I found myself looking at the treetops above. Snow covered my ruined eye. I didn't pull away from the cold. It felt good, soothing. Footsteps approached. Someone leant over me, staring down. I didn't have the strength to react. "Shame about the dog. Looks like it might once have been a valuable animal," I heard someone say. "That's not important, Rymar. The real question is what they were doing here. This one stinks of eagles. The fatter one's probably the one the chief will want to speak to." "Long gone," another voice said. "We'll track him, though." "Still a shame about the dog," Rymar said. I felt a hand move gently over my flank. "He didn't get to choose his masters." "Yes," the other speaker agreed. "A shame."